right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Bow Hunter Chronicles podcast, brought to you by Huntworth. Huntworth gear for all types of weather, all types of terrain, all types of budgets. It's clothing that just works. Check them out at huntworthgear.com. And spring has sprung. And I know that because I have contracted my first encounter with poison ivy. So for me, poison ivy is usually Memorial Day to, say, Valentine's Day. So that's how I know that we are in full swing with spring and outdoor activities. And I've only been out turkey hunting a couple of times. Heard some birds, couldn't get them to commit, and then I went out with Frank and nothing, just zero. But in doing so, I got to actually use in the field that Huntworth Camden hoodie. It's like a mesh hooded shirt, not very expensive at all. It's like $40. Really impressed with it. And for warm weather, like those turkey hunts where you're just sitting out there sweating, trying to fend off the mosquitoes, definitely something to check out. But this weekend I actually headed up to the UP, got some deer feeders up there built, so going to put them up for the kids to get more spots that are easy, and you can think whatever you want about it, but the thing is, these kids are out there hunting the one time a year that they go after Thanksgiving. Last year it was in the teens, and there's just only so many quote unquote good spots to hunt with 9 and 10-year-olds. And so putting up some supplemental feeders with the kids in mind, I think is the move up there. There was not enough food. The deer up there were eating the landscaping from the houses that were around there and kind of like yarded up. So that's something that really, going to go up there, do that. We're putting in some vitalized seed. My cousin was up there. He sprayed the field, so we're going to disc those under and plant, set up some stand sites and things like that. But getting bears all over our cameras up there, and hopefully we're going to draw for bear. Had to do the second season just because of the way my schedule laid out, so there's going to be dogs and other stuff like that, but pretty excited for that. But going to bring my turkey hunting stuff up there. We've got some turkeys on camera, we got wolves on camera, we got everything up there, and definitely spraying down for ticks, and I'll probably come back with some more poison ivy. But getting ready for tack, getting ready for doing our chores for spring food plots, all that stuff. And it's an exciting time of year, whether you're out there fishing or doing whatever. Frank's actually the guy that he hunts with down in Ohio. He comes up with his grandsons, and they turkey hunt with their buddies, and they've killed 3 birds in the last 2 days for the Ohio guys. So they're out there getting it. I've had to work, so just is what it is. But I'm going to get out there, get up to the UP this weekend, spend some time, and big win at the NRC. More people showed up. Our good friend Nate Roosevelt was there with Josh Arbogast, Jordan Hoover, and a bevy of other guys, and they passed doe with the bow. So in the UP, you're going to be able to hunt deer with kill does with a bow across the northern UP, as well as reinstating buck hunting during the youth hunt. So that's very exciting. And it kind of goes to what we were talking about. We talk a little bit about that on the podcast, just kind of, Adam Lewis, he on the internet, Facebook, any of the posts guys are putting out about this kind of stuff, was very pessimistic about any sort of change and anything like that. So it's good it was good to hear his perspective and kind of why and how he thinks that things were changed. But it's really good to hear that these things actually did change. And with more guys showing up, more opportunity to talk from the sportsman's side of it. So awesome there. But yeah, we'll get into this podcast. We talk a little bit about that. We talk about the kind of like the deer 365. Adam's got a class coming up here at the end of July. I got a code. You can use BHC on that. It's over at Deer IQ. But he kind of goes through all of this stuff that we talk about on here in depth about increasing your odds and kind of going at it with a data-driven system and trying to get those first hunt successes and putting all that information in there. So pretty awesome. Great conversation, especially for guys that are trying to get to that next level, who are, maybe think that they're doing everything right, but they're not getting the success that they're looking for. This is another way to kind of approach it. And it's, I talk a little bit about Jacob Sklenner and the way that he approaches things like that. And then the way that, back in the day, guys like Andy May and guys like that, they had Greg Litzinger, all these books of notes and maps and everything. It's kind of a modern day version of that. So I think you guys are really going to enjoy this. There's a lot to take away and some fun conversation. As always, thanks for listening. Give a shout out. Go over, check out our friends at Big Shot Targets, Huntworth. Latitude has their outlet getting ready to close. And just, again, some of the notable things on there, those Maverick saddles under $150. The Realtree Classic one is $136. If you're looking for a more comfortable saddle, if you're looking for a minimalist saddle, if you're looking for your first saddle, that one is incredible. They've got their ropes back in stock. They've got the Ranger 11s on sale. Great packs. The 22s are sold out in the outlet. And one of the guys in our Patreon group keeps bringing it up, but if you're using the DH3 stuff, it is 38% off on the Latitude site. So if you're looking to get a deal on setting up some scrapes, I'm going to be doing that up in the UP. Great time, great place to get that for cheaper. Big Shot, you can use code BCP, save 10% over there. Genesis 3D, if you're a Patreon, you can use our code for that. Get a hold of me on that one. But as always, thanks for listening. Enjoy the episode. All right, everybody. Adam back with another episode of the Bow Hunter Chronicles podcast. And today we're going to be talking about whitetail deer hunting at like kind of like a high level and kind of where guys are kind of like missing out, or what are some of like the biggest misses going through your approach to the season. And I've got Adam Lewis here from Deer IQ, Sound Barrier. He's been on here a few different times with a few different things to talk about this and some other things that are going on here in the state of Michigan with like our regulations and stuff like that. So how are you doing tonight, Adam?
Doing good, Adam. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah. So I think one of the last podcasts that we had on, it was Josh Arbogast, Jordan Hoover, and there's a lot of stuff on social media, a lot of people talking all this, and I feel like you've been like one of the biggest proponents of like saying like the way we're doing it isn't going to work. So like what do you, with like the regulations and things like that, how do you feel like that we can actively make a change, or that change can be made here in the state of Michigan?
So before they did the DMI team stuff, I wrote an article that was very detailed with my thoughts on stuff. And I don't know who actually read it and who actually listened to any of that, but it just became clear to me that once they went through the DMI process, that which the NRC asked for, right? They requested the DNR to do this. and they did not take any of these suggestions of the groups, right? And they put a ton of time into that. And just from the history of the NRC, it's been around for what, 30 years or whatever. It's just like a trend that I see that it just seems like they are not going to listen to public input. Like they'll listen, but they aren't going to take it, right? And so the guys you talked about there, I think it's great that they're so fired up about it, and I was too, and I think it's a very important thing. But the reality is, how I see it, is that going at it this way is not going to produce change. I think the NRC has proved that over the years. I don't think it really matters what they're saying. They might say, oh, yeah, we want your input. I just don't see with their actions that they are actually going to do anything. I think it's a power imbalance, really. It's a systemic problem from my perspective. So, honestly, I think the solution is a systemic change. And I think that would take a lot to do. It would take legislation. It would take, going through all that rigmarole and maybe getting a, pack and going that route. But I think for there to be long-lasting change, I think that power setup has to change. And so, for example, I think I said this on my podcast, like, I think a setup something like where the NRC is trimmed down to, like, let's say 3 members, and those are governor appointed, right? So there's still that side of things that they get to do that. But then the DNR gets actual votes, which they don't now. They just give suggestions, right? And then actually elected people like you and me and whoever could run for 3 other seats. And that would give you this 3-party voting system that no one could just push anybody else around, right? That makes sense to me. It at least gives some accountability to that system now that has zero accountability. The NRC has zero accountability to anybody in real, you're talking about power, right? They might say they do, they're appointed by the governor, but they really aren't accountable to anybody right now. So that's where I'm at with it, and I hope, the guys that are putting a lot of effort into it, I do hope that they make some ground, but I just don't see that happening just because of the history of all of it.
Yeah, I said something similar when we talked about that, and it seems like that's the way that it's supposed to be. Like the NRC is just supposed to be making sure that everything is supposed to be, sound scientific information, like the proposal G, I think it is, or whatever. But it's not, and I guess I never really thought of it that way from like a that they are not elected, so they don't have to get reelected. They don't have any um, they don't have anyone to answer to really other than like the governor, which is interesting. But I thought I'd bring it up because like in all of the forums and everything, you just have like a very nihilistic approach where it's just like, well, this is what we have and there's nothing we can do about it. And
Yeah, well, I guess I'm the old man now that's just jaded about everything. But I think it's just based on reality of what we've seen our whole lives, and expecting something different is just kind of silly, I think. But I hope they prove me wrong.
yeah, and I mean, I would like to see what happens because I guess in that very old man view or whatever, in this time that you've been paying attention, have you ever seen where there are like numbers? I think the closest thing that we could think about realistically is like what's going on right now with the coyotes and stuff.
What do you mean as far as numbers?
As far as like people showing up in numbers, like you're answering to the mob with the torches and pitchforks.
Yeah, I don't know. I've never honestly been to a meeting. From what I've heard of those guys, it's a lot of people on the other side showing up. So, that makes sense that if hunters aren't showing up, that they aren't going to listen. But I don't know. I don't know these meetings are what's driving their decisions. You know.
Okay. Yeah, and like I said, I just wanted to bring it up because we were talking about it, and I
Yeah.
just people are gonna say like I've seen that guy on all the forums, and he's saying like it's not gonna work, and so why should I listen to him about anything else? So I just wanted to like a long
Yeah.
form get an answer of like what your approach would be. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
and I think it's a tough approach, but I'm not trying to be the negative guy. I'm just trying to be realistic here that, hey, we've tried this before and
Yeah.
it hasn't worked.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess like again, like doing my job being devil's advocate, it's like you said you haven't been to a meeting, I haven't been to a meeting, so have we
Yep.
really tried? And I think that that's what those guys are trying to do is trying to like rally the troops and say, hey, if we can apply enough pressure, then maybe we can make some change. And then I guess at the end of the day, if the pressure is applied and it doesn't happen, then to go to, I guess you would end up having to lobby for a systemic overhaul, which I know very few people who would even know how to start that ball rolling.
Yeah, it get into the political realm for sure, but it's political as it is. So
Yeah. Well, like I said, I wanted to bring that up because it is relevant,
yeah,
and
and
it is.
well, we talked about it too. We did a whole podcast where we talked about the DMI suggestions before they actually voted. So
Hmm. And so, what do you think about like what they've proposed now for like the baiting, like have like a baiting fee and you pay to
yeah,
play?
it just seems weird to me. I don't know. What- is baiting okay or not, and why should we have to pay for it?
Well, yeah, I think it does bring up another question, but I think that question is answered in the fact that there is no repercussion for selling minerals and rocks and all of the supplements and bait at every gas station, every Walmart, Meyer, everywhere that you can possibly purchase that. I mean, I think that in and of itself says that from their perspective, baiting is okay. And then maybe it's just a way to say, okay, we're losing hunter numbers. This all this baiting isn't helping. It's angering the old guys, and you just said that would put you in that camp. But
Yeah.
feel like it's a lot more like older guys who used to hunt. That's how we hunted. Like I don't know
Hmm.
I mean. I just had a conversation the other day, and I feel really bad because like I just met the guy and we were talking hunting and whatever, and he's in an area that's surrounded by ag and surrounded by public land, and he's saying like, well, what are we supposed to do if we can't bait? Like what do you, why would you need, I mean, there's millions of acres of, public land right there, butted up to all these ag fields, but that's just a mindset. And his words, not mine, were, I'd just rather not even buy a tag than I'll hunt out of state if I can't bait here in Michigan. And I think that there is more people, we live in this microcosm, this echo chamber of like, oh, we're going to hunt this way and this is what we're going to do. But that may not be the majority.
I don't know. I've heard that from people like my dad's age. It's kind of that sentiment that my dad's in his 70s and they just get fed up with stuff. I guess I haven't done a ton of listening or research on the whole pay to bait thing, but it all gets back to the CWD. Like, is that an actual issue or not? If so, then keep on with the baiting stuff. If not, then my question would be, why should we have to pay for it? And if it's just because, hey, instead of raising tag prices, which they're looking at doing, okay, but I mean, just I guess be honest about it.
Yeah.
That's
I
what I'd
mean,
say.
well, yeah, I think those things too are too like diametrically opposed. Like, politics and transparency, they don't go one and the same. But for me, I think it's the same as like the like crossbow argument. Like I would be fine, like with the you pay extra $20 to hunt with a crossbow, you pay extra $20 to bait, and if you choose not to, you're not penalized. And I mean, if you think about it from like maybe what we're going to get into down the road here, like if you run into a bait pile, at least at that point, you kind of know what you're dealing with, right? Here's a guy who's willing to pay an extra $20 to bait, and then personally, like I said about crossbows or whatever, like I make the inference of like I kind of think about that as like the kind of hunter that I'm dealing with, you
Yeah,
know.
I guess we'll see. I don't know. It'd be nice if they were just transparent, I guess, and because the DNR, we know this, the DNR in general and NRC, and people look at those as the same entity. They are not, but, people lump them together. They're not trusted. So, and all the politics with that, if they're more transparent about it and upfront about, hey, we need to raise tag fees, and they've said that because we haven't in so many years, and inflation and, all this stuff costs up. Okay, I guess that's straightforward and honest. But if they put it out there like that, we just have to. Okay, it just seems a little weird to me, but I don't have a huge problem with it because I probably won't be baiting anyways. But
Yeah, and like I say, that's just one where I feel like it's interesting, and you bring up like the CWD problem or whatever, and then you had said like the NRC and DNR, and I feel like through this whole process, I feel like I've come to trust like the DNR more than the people because you think like, oh, the DNR sucks because you think that they're the same as the NRC. Well, here the DNR is saying, well, these are the things we need to do, and the NRC is saying, no, 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 we're going to do whatever we want. So I think it's kind of made me push back. So I would say like, oh, maybe if the DNR says there's not a problem, and I would be curious. Like I think the conversation like with CWD would have to be like, have through non-baiting, has there been like any sort of measurable impact in the amount of cases of CWD? And I don't even know how you would measure that.
I don't think they know. But yeah,
So if they're saying like we don't know if this is making a difference anyway, we have all these angry people. We're losing hunters, we're angering people, and they're doing it anyways. Why don't we just cash in? But I think if you want transparency, I think it's very difficult for them to say like, "Hey, we're just trying to make some money here." I think that that's a bad look, you know.
yeah, right, yeah. But they're in a pickle because they've been talking so long about how bad baiting is for spreading CWD, and now all of a sudden, CWD hasn't gone anywhere, and now it's going to be okay if you pay money. That is a real bad look, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, I think the way that it's been handled, like globally across the country, is a
Yeah.
is a bad look because we just don't know about it, and I mean, if you are, I didn't even know how you would say like that politically charged about it, like there are deer anyway. We should be able to eat them if we want to. You can't tell me what I can eat and shoot and all this stuff. So they're impinging on like quote unquote your right to hunt rather than your like ability or whatever. If you believe that it's something that you should be able to do, which there, especially the further north you get, I feel like the more like that sticks out. That's more of more boldly stated. Then you're dealing with something else entirely. But I don't know. Like I said, I just wanted to know like what you were. That's why I brought that up.
Yeah, those are my thoughts. I haven't followed it real closely lately, but
Yeah. So, you know, you're on here. We're going to talk about like where, like hunting as like a 365-day thing as far as like whitetails and kind of where, I guess, do you feel like there is like a line of demarcation between like where guys are like, regularly successful and then guys that are just either just going out and hunting luck or that are trying and they're maybe putting effort into the wrong things.
yes, I do think that. And before we jump in, let me give you my background a little bit in case people don't know me. And even if you listen to my podcast, I really don't share my background that much. So it might give a little perspective here. So I've been hunting 33 years. I grew up here in mid-Michigan. And over those years. I'll maybe tell a story here in a minute about my start and how I started and where I'm at today. But been hunting for a long time. I'm a teacher, so I've been teaching for 23 years, high school science, a lot of different subjects. And I've also been writing for about 12 years for different publications. So I got into that locally and then now nationally in a bunch of different magazines, from deer and deer hunting to North American whitetail and some in field and stream now. So that's kind of my perspective, and where I'm drawing a lot of this from is not only my own experience, but I've done a lot of observing, talking to some of the what people would consider great hunters in our country right now, talking to them, interviewing them, all that stuff, and taking all this in, right? And that's kind of where I come from when I'm talking about things. And also, I think it gives me a unique perspective, just being a teacher, being a writer, where you have to boil things down into just very manageable, understandable formats and like frameworks. Like, this is how it works, this is how you do this, or this is why this did this. You have to be able to do that. And writing and teaching has really made me have to hone that. And I think I can do it pretty good now. But through all those years of doing that, it's kind of how I am and where I am today with all this. So, but talking about, 365, I guess the difference between guys that are, if I can reframe your question or say it back to you, are consistent on good deer versus guys that are inconsistent or struggle. And we've all been there, right? Is there a demarcation? I think there definitely is. But it's also how you're doing the work and where you're putting the work in that is super important, that might get overlooked. So let me tell that story about when I was growing up and a kid. I think this kind of frames where I'm coming from. So my first year, we're about the same age, I think. 1991 was my first year hunting. 12 years old. That first year, my dad kept his notebook of every single hunt, what we saw, how long we sat out there and stuff. I did 50 sits on stand, 103/4 hours on stand, and I had one shot. And it was toward the very end of the year. I had a shot at this doe, and I hit her high. We never found her, right? But I hunted very hard that season. And then 2023, so a year ago, on 7 sits, I had 5 shots at mature deer that either I knew I wanted to shoot or that fit my criteria as mature deer to shoot. 7 sits, 5 shots. And that's a huge difference, right? And it isn't because I wasn't trying hard when I was younger, and I had a lot of years of struggling in between that too. But it was, you start figuring things out about the how and where you put the hard work, right? And if I go back through a bunch of my hunts, the past since 2016, I think was kind of a changing point for me. I started hunting a lot of public land. I started just, figuring out the whys to a lot of stuff. I started writing in a few years before that, And if I start tracking from 2016 till now, all my hunts and the good bucks I've shot, over 84% of those are under one condition, and it's what I kind of base everything around my hunting around now, and that is they're on the first sit. Like, the first sit in the location is by far your best chance. And so I try to replicate that now and say, okay, if that's true, and there's collared buck studies that show the same thing, after your first hunt in a location, if you don't shoot the deer you're after, or a deer you're trying to shoot, your chances just start going down and fast, right? And so how can you replicate and get as many first hunts as possible in a season? And if you can do that, then you become very, very efficient. You have a lot of opportunities. And, the 365 thing plays into that whole framework of how you lead up to that. Because if you look at this, and I'll let you jump in here in a second if you want, but if you kind of picture a triangle, like a 2-dimensional triangle with like 6 tiers, I kind of break it down into like 6 tiers. The very tip top of that, like just the pinnacle, little tiny triangle at the top, is for me where that is the hunt, and that is the hunt time, right? It's very strategic. I call it a surgical hunt, where it's just like very precise and exact. You go in, you shoot the deer, and you get out. But it also represents, if you picture that pyramid of sorts, that triangle, that those are representative of time spent in certain things to get there. And the pinnacle is the smallest part of that. It's the smallest amount of time. Most guys, and what I used to do, go back to my story, have that flipped upside down. They have it inverted. They're spending like most of their time hunting. And the other stuff that's actually more important that should lead to that hunt, they're spending less time than they should doing. So that is a 365 thing, but it's also very strategic in how you do it and where you're spending your time, I guess.
So what happened in 2016? Like what changed? Or was there like a moment or a season where he said, okay, this isn't working. I need to do something different?
I think it just, a bunch of stuff kind of came together. It kind of made sense of years of struggling, and I did pretty good, right? I wasn't a terrible hunter, but it's like something just kind of flipped there. And again, I think it was the writing kind of made me, like, when you have to write stuff down, and I always tell people to do this, like, the best thing you can do to improve as a hunter is to just get a journal, and every time you go out and hunt, you write down the whys. Like, why did this work, or why didn't this work? And you make yourself answer it. And so if you're a writer, you're doing that all the time. You're having to figure things out. And I started doing that much more, in accompanying with starting to hunt public, because growing up, I hunted a lot of private. And when you hunt private, as you probably know, some of these chunks, when I was younger, teenager and stuff, you got like two options, right? I can hunt here or here. You're not thinking about it. You're just going and hunting. And it works out or it doesn't work out. When I started hunting public, when I started writing, all of a sudden I had to figure everything out, because there's a million options on public land. Why am I going to hunt here versus here? What are the deer doing? Why are they doing that? You have to bring it to what I call front brain logic, engage your brain and start figuring that stuff out. So I think it just kind of all came together around that time, and I started tracking stuff a little more, and just the light bulbs, I guess, came on.
So what has been like the biggest factor in your success in replicating these first sits?
So there's a lot of things.
But if you could only do one, like if you said, okay, I'm there, if all things being aside, trail cameras, in-season scouting, glassing, driving around, cell cams, e-scouting, if you could only do one thing that has been the most pivotal thing for your success?
Boy, that's tough. Like I said, I think there's like 6 things that go toward that hunt. One huge one I will say is having a ton of spots. You have to diversify your locations. You have to have so many spots that, you have options for every wind, for every time of season, and for morning, evening, you have it all categorized and figured out. A lot of times you get pigeonholed into having to hunt here or there if you want to hunt, and it's not ideal conditions for that. That's a huge one. I don't know if it's the number one, but it's a huge one to have a very diverse, what I call portfolio of spots. One of the big things, and that I sent you, that I think is super important for guys, is to actually know where you're at. I think in the hunting community, so as a teacher, this, I guess, is coming out in me, that part of me, but a lot of times we bounce around from this to that, and there's a lot of people that listen to podcasts, they're watching YouTube, but it's very scattered, the information they're getting, and it's very difficult to know where we're at. Where am I actually at as a hunter? If I had an issue with my truck, and I couldn't figure out what it was, I just knew something was up, and I just started fixing stuff all over on it and guessing, and we maybe all been there. you can spend a ton of time and a ton of money and never fix the problem, right? You take it into mechanic, what do? They run diagnostics on it. This is the problem. Fix this one thing and you're set, right? And so I think that's a huge problem, at least from my perspective in the hunting community. A lot of guys are just kind of trying this, trying that. What's going to fix the problem for me to be a better hunter? And so that's why, I came up with an actual test, which goes through these 6 things I'm talking about, what I call core competencies, and it actually tests you. Because if you don't look in the mirror, you don't see what's going on, right? You have nothing to tell you back where your strengths and weaknesses are, other than you guessing or what you think they are or aren't. And a lot of times we aren't very good at that, right? And we probably have a lot of blind spots, all of us do, that we don't know, right? And so for me, and I'll just throw this out there, that I'm doing a workshop this summer. With part of that is for guys that are like serious and really want to be a better hunter, is we need to know where you're at right now. So you're not wasting 10 years trying this thing, trying that thing, listen to that, but really focusing on actually, this is where you need to focus for the best growth, is these couple things. And then you start on that, and you're going to have much better results quicker because you actually know. So taking a competency test of sorts is, I think, the first step, so you know where you're at. And that's a huge one.
So when you talk about spots, right, and like one of the things on there, like one of the questions was like, do you have 2 times the amount of spots for days that you have available to hunt? And but that's one of the things I think that most guys, and I would put myself in this category, because I would say that I don't know, maybe atypical in the sense that like I'd like to be surprised. So like the fact that there's trail cameras are more for like validation that there's a deer that I want to kill in the area. Maybe, but lots of the spots that I hunt, like I don't have any trail cameras, and it kind of like goes against, I think, what you're saying is like, I know that these areas hold good deer because I've been in there, I've seen the sign, but maybe I don't have it like for this moment and this in time. Mm-hmm. But so like, what do those spots look like? Because I think one of the things that, everybody said, and is very like cliche, but you can't kill a 150 if there's not one on the property, right?
Right.
So if I have 70 spots that I can hunt, and all, I have, 17 for morning on this wind, breaking it down for all the winds, for all the things that are quote unquote good spots, but there isn't good deer to kill. Does that count as a spot? You know what I'm saying? Like, what is a spot?
Yeah, I mean, you do need to know what's there, and that gets into the scouting part of it, right? And also the quality of data. So if it's just a spot, I mean, that's a part of it, but then there's the scouting that goes into it too, right? And collecting data, and getting actionable data, right? So that's where you get closer to season. So let's say you have spots this is a potentially good early season spot. It's potentially pre-rut, good spot, et cetera, et cetera. You have all these listed out. You're still going in there. You still want to get that closer to season intel from scouting, because there's, in my perspective, there's different levels of quality data, right? And I kind of rank it. I have like a ranking 1 to 5. Like the 1, is I know nothing. I'm just walking in the woods, right? I don't have any, and that's low odds hunting. And so how I look at it is, it's never guaranteed, right? But what is the highest odds I can stack in my favor? And that's what I'm going to try to go with, right? And so if, I have no intel and I just walk out in the woods randomly, okay, that's a low odds hunt. Could I shoot an awesome buck? Could, but if you're gambling on it, that's not a very good gamble, right? And then you work your way up. Like a 3 is kind of what I think you're talking about in my 1 to 5 scale. Like a 3 is, yeah, deer should do this. Maybe they've historically done this. This is a good funnel or whatever, or it's a rut time hunt. And for me, rut hunts are maximum of 3 because it's just a gamble of deer running around and stuff. Um, and I try to rank them up through there based on the current intel you have, right? A 3 is historic. A 4 and 5 is like, I know there's a deer active here that I would shoot. A 4 would be, I'm not sure if it's daylight or not. A 5 would be, I've confirmed this deer is daylight active within 24 hours of where I can hunt him and shoot him. And so the closer you get up that scale, the higher you scale, the higher your odds are going to be with that. So you have to have those spots, but then you have to have intel to help guide you, I guess, so it's not just haphazard. But if you don't have them, then the problem is you just start hunting your favorite couple spots over and over again, and you wear them out. And so it's multiple things going on there. Having a bunch is important, and then using the data as to how to decide, where I'm going to hunt.
Yeah, I mean, I'm like in my mind, like trying to work through this in a sense because, like, so are you able? I guess in what ways what are some situations in which you could have like that one actionable data without cell cams?
Well, observation hunts is one. So regular trail cams too. They don't have to be cell cams. I mean, you can check your trail cameras. Observation hunts are big. Like last year in Ohio, one I can remember where I had no pictures of this buck I was going after. I hunted and I saw this buck off quite a ways one morning. Okay, so I saw him. I observed where he was going. I saw fresh scrapes and rubs up there in that location where I'd been. So I gathered that data and I put the pieces together. Pretty sure it's that buck. So that was actionable intel, right? That was in daylight, a place I could shoot this deer. I didn't spook the deer, right? That was like longer distance observation type stuff. And then the next day, I went in there and put a set exactly where he did the day before. And that morning, he came through and like right to my tree. I did not get that buck. I hit him in the shoulder, and he's still alive. But that's a good example, right? And so, yeah, cell cameras are great. Trail cameras are great, but it doesn't have to be that. But I guess the flip of that is if you're just always guessing, again, those are lower in my perspective and from my experience. When I'm doing that a lot, I get very sporadic results, and it's kind of luck, right?
Yeah, like I say, I'm just like going through my head because like in that spot, like in that situation, the exact scenario that you just had said, and I'm thinking about like how does this apply to out of state hunts and things like that. Do you count that as a first time sit because it was a far away? Is that a second time sit? And then in that same example, like that that is that in season scouting, like how much in season scouting versus sitting versus how much time are you, because when you say like, oh, I had 5 shots and 7 sits, was that the only 7 sits that you had, or was there lots of other things that went into it leading up to those 5 shots?
Yeah, there's other things. So what I'd say, that was a far distance away. So that was not the same spot where I had the shot as to where I had seen him. So that would be a first sit at that location. And, it does depend on distance and stuff. He didn't go through where I was. And he didn't the next day either type thing. So I'd call that would be a first sit there. Yeah, and leading up to that, I guess the general rule, what I'll say is that if I find myself just hunting and hunting and hunting and I'm not getting anywhere, I need to back off and start scouting more until I have this evidence that, okay, I know if I hunt there, I'm gonna have a good chance at it. That's when your odds go up. I was just reading something from Adam Hayes. I don't know if you know Adam Hayes, about a huge buck he shot. He was talking about the same thing, how he shot this 200-inch buck, but he, I think, watched it like 20 times. He glassed this buck 20 times to figure him out, and then he went in one time and he shot him. And I'm saying, like, that is what you want to try to do for higher odds, and not just guessing here and there. But it can be tricky though in season. You're trying to uh, keep tabs on them, or get tabs on one without tipping your hand. So how you get that data in season a lot of times can be tough, but it's critical to help you out and to increase your odds.
How does this apply? And I don't, I mean, obviously, it would apply to all hunting, right? You could figure out these scenarios. But for guys who are like not very successful and haven't had a lot of experiences, shooting deer, shooting bucks, any of this stuff. Generally speaking, you just use an example of a guy shooting a 200-inch buck and doing this, and I feel like on a level, it's really hard it's really hard to do. Like that right there is like a guy who says, okay, I want to become a better hunter, and then have the discipline and then the poise to like pull that off. If they're not very good, is going to be really difficult. So for a guy who's maybe shot a doe, maybe shot a spike, and says, okay, I want to move up, like how does this apply in those types of scenarios?
Yeah, first of all, yeah, most of us probably won't ever shoot a 200-inch deer. I guess that wasn't the point. The point is seeing something, getting data on it before you try to move on it, right? Getting really good data before you do that is going to be the highest odds you can. And that could be for whatever deer, right? For guys that are just starting out, I think the biggest thing you can do, and it's like the foundation of what I teach, is like getting systems in place, like these core systems that once you get them in place, they start working for you. One of those would be like scent control. And some people, they don't believe in that or whatever. I do, because I've used it and seen results. But it's getting systems like that in place. And once they're in place, they really start working for you instead of you struggling with certain things, right? So systematizing things is really important. And, with whatever it might be, your gear, getting systems together. Like a lot of guys are into, obviously the mobile hunting now is huge, right? And there's all these different systems, and guys go nuts on that. And for me, it's like you got to get a system, and you got to get it dialed in so well that you can do it in your sleep, and now it's working for you, right? It's automatic. Like you got to automatize, as they say, a lot of these systems, core systems, to start working for you, like that, like scent control, like the sound issue, sound management, and taking care of that. Getting a lot of those in place is, I think, the one of the core foundations. Once you know kind of, okay, your weakness, and again, getting back to that knowledge, self-knowledge and awareness of this is actually where I can work the most, that's where that an assessment will tell you that, right? Oh, I need to actually work on this stuff, and you can hone that. And if it's everything, then you're just going to chip away at it, right? But there's usually a couple things that'll you can pinpoint on and knock those out first, get those going for you, like these systems, and then you go from there, right? That's what I'd say. Systematizing things is really helpful.
Yeah, and I wasn't like saying, yeah, we're not going to see a 200-inch deer. I was just saying, for someone new, like as soon as you start to mention like 200-inch deer, like, we talk about, oh, we're only going to kill.
Check out. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, they're just like, yeah,
Yeah.
that's not me. Um,
And
But
I hunt public land, right? I hunt public land in Michigan, so I'm not shooting 200-inch deer, but I shoot good deer. And and this could be a whole talk in itself about how you got to look at your area, right? And how you figure out your criteria based on your area has to be that. It has to be based on your area. And in my area, it's the 3.5-year-old deer on public land, which is really good in Michigan. It might score 100 inches. It might score 140 inches if it's really nice. I don't know, but that's it, right? And being honest about where you hunt is real important.
so you just said scent control. So I want to hear like your you don't even have to go through like the full like John Eberhart type system, but like if you're putting and I think maybe the science background is like where it's you know trust the science, right? Like it's a thing. But why like with all these spots and all the work that you put in and everything, is it just a variable that you're trying to eliminate, or is it more than that? Like because I feel like John Eberhart says, "Well, I'm just going to go ahead and hunt. Like I need to hunt that spot right now." So
Yeah.
I've never been winded in 50 years. Like it's never happened. I'm bulletproof. But all those things aside, you're trying to put yourself in the best odds. So what is the
Yeah.
deal with scent control?
Yeah, it really, all these systems, they're just stacking the odds in your favor, and they're eliminating Murphy's Law as much as possible, right? You got to eliminate anything that can go wrong as much as you're in your power to do. And scent's a huge one, right? Everybody would probably agree on that, right? The disagreement is if you can eliminate enough that they don't, you know, booger out. And that's why I think it's so important. And so, yeah, I just have developed a system based on stuff I've learned and kind of put together that, like, I see a huge difference. So my first, I'd say 19 years of hunting, I did not have any scent control. And, like, it was every time a deer got downwind of me, it would smell me, it would snort, it would take off. It was like a known thing, right? Hundreds of data points, I'll call those, right? And then I started playing around with things like washing my stuff, putting it in garbage bags, right? The basics right at the beginning. And then added to that, and I started noticing, I'm like, wow, those deer were downwinding me. They did not, do anything. And you just start working that over the years and what works and everything. And pretty soon you get to where you're like surprised if something does and wind you. And then you are like, well, what I do wrong? Because most of the time they don't, type thing. So yeah, it is just if you can eliminate those things, it translates into more opportunities, right? And it translates into less pressure. Like a couple years ago, I shot a buck up here. I'll use this example on public land. It's around 140-inch deer, really great buck, 4.5-year-old buck, and there was a ton of other deer. And this is another factor that I don't think some people don't think about is you have to get past all the deer, like all their eyes, all their ears, all their noses, right, to shoot one deer. And up here, areas with high deer density, that might be a dozen deer or more. And so this one night I was going after this buck on public land, and there was a lot of deer around. And I was hunting over this scrape. It was about 8 yards away. And these does came out downwind of me about 80 yards. And so this is where people question, oh, is that working or not? Well, you kind of know. And for me, the criteria is not that you can eliminate all the scent in the world coming from you. Like, I think that's the straw man argument is, oh, scent free, that's impossible, right? Well, that's not the criteria. The criteria is, can you eliminate enough that deer do not adversely react to you? That's all you need to do. And I know you can do that, right? So these does came out downwind of me. They're about 80 yards out there. And one starts doing this, with their nose. Like, so you know that you're on this threshold of, like, they're kind of smelling something. But then they just went about their thing. They didn't adversely react. And that's when you know that, okay, I've just gotten below that amount, and they didn't and all the other deer came out, and that buck came in last light. A smaller buck was with him as his like sacrificial lamb, basically, and he sent him in. He went into the scrape. It was downwind of me. Worked it over, didn't smell anything, and then that buck came in and I shot him. So if you can just eliminate these things as systematically as you can, that can screw up hunts, you're going to have more opportunities, and that's a huge one, right?
Yeah, I mean, like when I took the quiz, right? And so you're saying like, oh, how often does this happen? And like in my mind, I answered that as a 3, which is like a bad answer because it's like, oh, you definitely need improvement or whatever. But for me, I'm always trying to access into the wind to get to a spot where I think the deer are going to come from the other way. So the amount of deer that I feel like that I encounter downwind of me is, a marginal number compared to the amount of deer that come from where I want. And, we could all argue the case that, I didn't see any deer from down there because they smelled me or whatever, and I never got a chance or whatever. But it just seems like, when I'm hunting very haphazard, it's always, wind in my face, looking for sign, looking at the map and saying, okay, where's these deer going to come from, so that I can avoid that sort of situation. And I know, there's always the deer that circle around you, or they're trying to figure it out.
Yeah, another thing to think about, if you're always doing that, the argument is, well, yeah, then they'll never smell me. But another thing is the idea of bucks circling something. So if you're hunting a scrape or whatever, they're wanting to circle that and catch your wind, or scent check it before. And then the idea of this that I think escapes a lot of people when I give seminars and stuff is, you got to think about the stuff you touch too. Like, it's not just scent on the wind, it's things you touch, right? And so being as scent free as possible for that is important. Your trail coming and going, especially public land, you can't trim stuff. Like, you're constantly touching stuff, right? If you're getting in, at least anything's thick. And then 2 is this thought that, now bucks don't 100% always do this. There's another argument that says, well, if bucks always, walked into the wind, they'd be on the West Coast. And well, they move at night too, right? They're smart about that, but they like to move when things are in their favor as much as possible, especially older, smarter deer. The more mature deer like to do that. And so if you're always set up so it's 100% good for you and terrible for them, you're decreasing the chance that they will feel safe and you'll be able to see them, right? So you're actually stacking it against yourself by playing it so safe. And so the more you can use stuff like really get a system for scent control and start, giving them the wind more, I've noticed more opportunities because they feel safe, right? They feel, oh yeah, I can smell this. It's safe. Now I'll move in daylight, or they'll just sit back and move, in the dark. And so I think there's a lot of reasons that it stacks, the odds in your favor.
Yeah, and I can 100% attest to that. The deer that I killed this year in Tennessee was the last day that this WMA was going to be open, and the wind was like 100% wrong, but we went in there anyways, and it was like, this is the spot, and if I kill him, he's going to be, 2 steps away from winding me.
Yeah.
And I shot him at 10 yards, and it was right there, but it was on like the wrong wind for that spot. But it's just so I brought up the scent control thing because it's a very hot topic.
Oh yeah.
And it's also like one of those things where when you look at like variables, I guess, where does scent, like, of all of the things that are important to you, where does scent control fall, like 1 being the most important and 10 being the least?
Good question. Well, it's one of my foundational systems, so it's pretty important. Obviously, you can shoot bucks without doing it, so it's not like the 10 on the list if that's the highest. But it's right up there, right? It's something that you should nail down. It's, at least this 6 or 7, at least. And because I know that if I don't do it, I'm giving up opportunities, right? It could be the difference, one of those things, and there's a lot of little things, but it's one of those things that could be the difference between tag soup and actually getting a deer.
So I asked because I would say that understanding that it's important also, but I also feel like in my mind, as far as like systems go, it's the one that rides like the finest razor's edge in that like it, it if it's such a high foundation and you go to the gas station or you get food or you do this or
Yeah.
you do that, then why even hunt? Like for me, it's the one thing that has so many variables and like I said, it rides that razor's edge for me. Like if I have to worry about it that much, like, and we'll use John Eberhart. Well, if we have to
Mm-hmm.
be John Eberhart and we don't eat onions for the entire hunting season and we don't drink coffee and we shave our head and all of our body hair and all these things, if you don't do that, then why even hunt? Like it just seems to be like more. I can put more energy. I can put that energy into scouting or playing the wind or something.
Yeah, I mean that's a lot of people's perspective. I'll just counter that with, well, it is a meticulous thing, right? Because if you screw up one little thing and you forgot about your boots stink, and everything else is perfect, they're still going to smell you, right? But once you start doing it, though, it just becomes a habit. It's like anything, right? And so that's why, again, a system, at first, the front end, it's like, oh, it's all the hard work. But once you get it up there and set, it's like you're just doing it. You're just doing it, right? I think it gives big results. But if you sacrifice that area, which you can choose to do, I just think you're leaving a lot on the table, because then you're like, oh shoot, I screwed that one up. Now I got to scout somewhere else. You're starting from scratch again somewhere else, and pretty soon the season's over, right? And you think about a season, it's not that long, right? I mean, our opportunities are pretty small between work and kids and everything you're doing and the weather, and you finally get a couple good days and it's like the right time of year, and you screw it up because you're just lazy or whatever. That kind of stings, so I don't like that.
Yeah, like I said, it's the one thing for me that it's so hard. Like I brought a peanut butter and jelly to eat, like messed up my scent control. Like everything just goes out the window. So that's the hard thing. I do appreciate the systemic part of it though, because I think when you say systems and all that stuff, like I think about like me going up and down the tree and how everything goes in my pack and everything
Yeah.
like that. And it is just set. It's just so easy now where, at the beginning it would be like struggle to do this and get everything set. And
Yeah.
like now it's just, and I can see all that. But like I said, like
You just got to
peanut
bite
butter
the
and
bullet,
jelly or
man.
something.
You got to bite the bullet and start it, because it's a good example. Like that's another one, the sound management system part of it, which is your gear, which is your coming and going, all that stuff, getting that dialed in. If one little mess up, fumble, cling, clank, that's it. If a deer hears that, that is it. And people don't realize how far sounds travel. I've talked about this before, but it's amazing on a calm day how far sounds travel. I've tested it in a booth at University of Toledo. All these sounds, right? They carry a long ways. I'll just make it short and sweet. And if a deer hears something off, maybe a young dumb deer will be like, "Oh, what was that?" and they'll just still come by you. But if you're targeting some older, smarter deer, no, they aren't going to come by you.
Yeah. So from this 365-day approach, like what should people be doing like right now? Like what are the most important things? Like what are you doing throughout like the spring and summer months into that, what we would consider like deer hunting time?
Good question. Well, right now I'm doing podcasts and stuff like that, and trying not to get distracted. But spring is great, and this is probably a lot of people saying this, is for getting your spots set, finding new spots, doing the scouting before it greens up, and right now it's greening up. So it's you still can do that in the summer, I guess, but it gets nasty out there and all that. But finding spots, finding new spots, getting your spots set and ready to go, is little as possible. You want to do that during season, right? For me, I hate having to scout a new spot during season because it's just so intrusive, right? I'd rather just go into a spot and hunt. And that's one reason I actually don't like mobile hunting is because there's the gear setup stuff. I'd rather just like hover, and appear in a tree. But getting everything set up now with your spots, super important. Getting new spots, that portfolio, that diversity I talked about, get a bunch of those set up. Get it on paper, right? Each spot, okay, this I think is going to be, if it's a new spot, I think this will be a rut spot on these winds, blah, blah, blah. You get it all down, right? You get that list set. Also, your gear. Like, I just bought some new stuff. So start going through your stuff, all your gear, your systems, all this stuff. What wasn't working last year? Because hopefully you wrote it down because you probably forget by, the next season. Oh, yeah, that thing was a problem and it annoyed me, and now it still is because I forgot about it, right? So take care of that stuff. Your stands, your stuff you need to buy. I just bought, a couple random things that were on sale because right now, good time for sales. Mother's Day sales. Buy something for you, right? Take care of your systems. Get them in place, right? It's another good thing. Cameras, making sure they're working. I always get ones that crap out, every year. Stuff like that. Just getting stuff set is important.
The one thing I took away from like what you said right there, and one thing that I think I definitely can do a lot of things better, but one thing would be like to right now kind of go through and catalog like what spots that I have. You always think like, oh, I got so many spots, I can hunt here, I can hunt there, but you don't necessarily like I don't have them written down anywhere and then say like, okay, this is like a good win. And it's funny because I would like that just to see like
Yeah.
to kind of like say, okay, well, I thought I had 30 spots and I've only got 17,
Mm-hmm.
or whatever. But same same thing is like, and I think one of the things that will probably get pushback from this is like what comes to mind is like Jacob Sklenner and the way that because Andy May, Jason Campbell, you listen to these guys talk from like about back in the day, like before the internet, before any of this stuff, and they had books and books and books of journals about everything. They had all of the like USGI maps like printed off so that they could see everything that everything we hold in our pocket now.
Mm-hmm.
But like Jacob Sklenner goes through all of his trail cameras with the wind and everything and barometric pressure and all that stuff, and it becomes like just a data analysis to be
Yeah.
like, oh, I'm going to go do this. And I think, at some point it can almost like take the fun out of it if you're just, and I guess if you're doing it like on such a high level that you're just like, okay, well, I just need these 6 things that I'm going to go kill. And then, well, yeah, my season's over or whatever. You know what I mean?
I guess it depends on your perspective. I think those are important things, though, like the data part of it, because I've shot numerous bucks, based on data from the previous year. And so if you don't know that stuff, then, I guess think about season, and I guess it's not for everybody, but if you really want to step up your game it can be a little bit like a job now and again, right? Hopefully you find fun in that, but, most people like to go through camera pictures. But yeah, looking for data, looking for weaknesses. I call those buck profiles. You're building out a profile of certain deer, and you're trying to figure out when and where you can kill them, or if they're killable. Some deer are not killable where you can hunt them. Eliminating those, right? Going through this stuff. Another thing from your test was looking at like sedentary versus mobile bucks. That's like a new thing that's kind of out, is understanding buck personalities. Can you figure that out? Because mobile bucks might not even be in your area when you're trying to hunt them, and you're wasting a whole season hunting this deer, that's 2 miles over here because he has a different range, right? And so it's important, I guess, find the fun in that. I think that's pretty fun, but those are important things to do too. But yeah, each person, if you don't find any fun doing that, you just like to go out in the fall, then that's what you do, right?
Yeah, and like I say, like some of those questions, like the one that you just said, like uh, that's why I was asking, like, what are other ways of like getting these like in time real data analysis type things? Because like if you're not running a million trail cameras, or you don't have like, and that's why I was asking, like, what's a spot? Because if I don't have a spot that I have a verified deer that I want to kill in there, then it's impossible for me to know if he's sedentary or moving,
Right.
because I don't even know that he's there. And so for me, like, some of that fun is the validation of going into a spot and then being right, on any level, and being essentially like undetected. Um, and so like, but again, I think that this is great even for guys like me who don't really want to sit down behind a spreadsheet and be like, okay, this is how it's going to be. Because, and I'm not saying that this is for you, or like even Jacob, but I think that there's sometimes some stuff there where it becomes like, I'm you're essentially like a scientist and he's an engineer, and you can go through, like Bill Thompson, when you're talking about that, these deer, where they're living, whatever. It's like he built target packages for humans. Like, to do the same thing for a deer is like, that's the way he analyzes data, right? And it's very effective, but that isn't everybody's personality. But I think even so, like, being able to go through catalog spots, look at that stuff, figure out like where you're lacking, and to be able to like step it up even on any level, whether you're a first time hunter or you're trying to like kill one or two specific bucks every year. I think that there's a lot that can be taken away from this
For
and kind
sure.
of what you've got going on.
Yeah, and I'll just say this, and we don't need to go down this path, but it I think it's important, is this difference between, a lot of people, you'll hear this phrase, I'm going with my gut here. I'm going with my gut, right? To me, that means you're guessing, right? Versus, no, I have actual data for this. So the more you can do that, again, it's the reward, right? The more I can not guess, but know, I'm way better off. I have way better chances than if I'm just like, I don't know, going with my gut here, or I'm guessing, right? Uh, it's just the odds thing, right? So yeah, the more you can get into data crunching like that, with some systems and things like I try to do, I think you're better off.
So for you and like what you've got going on, like if people are interested in this, like what have you got coming up, and like where can they follow along, all of that sort of stuff?
Yeah, so if you go to deeriq.com, we got a lot of stuff there. But what I have this summer is a workshop. So we have a 2-day workshop where we go through this six-step system to really dial in what you're doing, and we start with the test, right? Before people get there, they will take the test. They will have a couple areas of focus to work on over the weekend, and we're going to go through all these steps, these systems. They'll get a lot of stuff. It'll be in class and also application of this information, but they're going to be able to walk out of there with not only knowing, where they need to work, but having a plan. And I think that's different than a lot of maybe other workshops that are out there, that we dial it into that level, right? And you start at the foundation with that test, you implement these things so they can start getting to that point where, like I said, the idea where when you're going in for that first hunt, you know why you're going there, and it's super high odds hunting, and you just see better results. So that workshop's a big thing, and I'm giving a code out, code BHC, right? So 10% off if you're interested in that. It's July 26th and 27th in Saginaw, Michigan, but you can check it out on the DeerIQ website. There's more info there, and you can get that 10% off if you're interested. So
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you coming on and kind of
thanks for
talking
having
through
me.
this, and especially like the stuff at the beginning, just
Yeah.
through like the things that are going on, because I think it's an interesting, like hot topic right now, because like you said, we should already be done with all of our scouting, so we gotta do some things to think about deer hunting, right?
Right, man. Well, thanks for having me once again, Adam.
Awesome. Thanks, man.